All right, so today we're going to dive into something pretty unique. We're looking at how one person, Liat, is introducing the world to Israeli music and culture, all through her Substack newsletter, The Liat Show.
Yeah, it's interesting, she uses music as like this gateway
Yeah.
to understanding a culture like it's this universal language, and it really clicks with her idea that music can just transcend language barriers.
Right, like you don't have to speak Hebrew to appreciate the emotion and the artistry.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for those who maybe aren't familiar with Substack, it's a platform that gives writers, a way to share their work directly with readers so they can kind of build a community.
Yeah, and what really strikes me about Liat's approach is how she mixes those personal stories, her anecdotes, with the actual musical analysis.
It makes it so engaging, right? It's like you're not just, listening to the music. You're understanding the context, the stories behind the artist, and that whole cultural tapestry that influences their work.
Like you're experiencing it with her, kind of through her eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And she starts her deep dive with these two legendary figures, Rami Fortis and Barry Sakharof, together known as Fortis Sakharof. She even describes them as having this almost uncanny ability to foresee social processes, which I thought was really intriguing.
And she backs that up with some really concrete examples, like their song America, where they're critiquing, the American dream and how it's impacting the world. That lyric, "You have to fight hard to be a simple man," really resonated with me.
It speaks to that pressure we all feel in so many cultures to conform, chase that material success.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it shows how their music, even though some of it was written decades ago, can still be so universal, connecting with audiences across cultures.
Because it's tapping into something timeless about the human experience.
Right, and that's what makes Liat's approach so effective. She doesn't just present the music, she analyzes it, connecting it to bigger social and cultural themes. It's not just entertainment, it makes you think.
It gives us this insider's view of Israeli music. Like her passion is just contagious.
It is.
Especially when she's describing, going to concerts with friends at places like the Elephant City Hall and the Beat in Haifa. It creates such a vivid picture of that Israeli music scene.
It makes it so relatable, right? Not like this faraway thing. And it shows that power of music to create communities and shared experiences no matter where you are in the world.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Liat points out that both Fortis and Sakharof have these roots in Arab countries. So Fortis's family is Italian and Iraqi Jewish, and Sakharof was actually born in Turkey. This really highlights that mix of cultures within Israel and the Middle East as a whole, right?
Absolutely. And it ties into that bigger point Liat makes about music's power to heal, bridge cultures, even, foster world peace. Especially within the global Arab community, it's like music can be this common thread.
That connects people even with all the cultural and political differences.
Exactly. And she mentions how Sakharov's love for Arabic music really resonated with the Israeli audience. So it suggests there's this really interesting exchange and appreciation happening within the region.
Like there's more common ground than people might realize.
Yeah. And she makes this really thought-provoking observation about how Sakharov blends those Turkish and Middle Eastern influences with rock and roll. That fusion, it speaks to the interconnectedness of these cultures.
Despite those historical tensions that exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like she's showing us how music can break down those barriers.
Create space for dialogue and understanding.
Exactly.
That's what makes Liat's approach so unique. She's not just giving you facts, she's weaving together that musical analysis, the personal stuff, and social commentary. So you get this multi-layered experience.
It makes you think more critically about the music.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me was how Liat emphasizes collaboration between musicians from different cultures. She even uses it as a way to gauge how open a culture is, their willingness to build bridges. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really insightful. It's like music becomes this cultural barometer. It reflects a society's values and attitudes towards those who are different.
I love that. It adds this whole other layer of meaning to the music itself.
Right. It's not just the melodies and lyrics. It's the social and political forces at play.
Yeah. And her analysis of Sakharof's song, A Broken Heart is a Whole Heart, was so moving.
It was.
She unpacks the lyrics, explores those universal themes of love, heartbreak, that longing for connection.
And she connects it to her own experiences, making it so relatable. And she encourages listeners to really pay attention to the Arabic, Oriental, and Middle Eastern influences in the melody and arrangement, just highlighting that richness of the cultural blend.
Like she's inviting us to not just hear the music, but to feel it.
Exactly.
Experience those raw emotions.
And she gives this great tip, for experiencing the song fully. Hit play, read the translation at the same pace as the lyrics, and then close your eyes and just feel the music, like a guided meditation.
I love that. Reminds us to slow down sometimes.
Yeah.
Disconnect from all the noise and let music transport us, even if it's just for a few minutes.
And that's such a valuable gift that she's offering through her work. It's this invitation to connect with a different culture and expand our understanding of the world through sound.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
And Liat is all about the call to action. She's always encouraging readers to subscribe to her Substack and Patreon. She even calls them passengers who need to fasten their seatbelts.
It's like she's creating this adventure, right? A collaborative one. And It's not just about, money. It's about joining this community.
Of like-minded people.
Yeah, passionate about music.
Yeah, and she talks about this journey to infinity. It hints at this whole world of music and stories just waiting to be discovered.
It's a great image.
Before we move on to the next part, which focuses on the amazing Ofra Haza, what struck you about how Liat connects music to social change? She talks about recommending Israeli music to friends as a way for them to actually understand the culture better. Do you think that works?
I think music can be a really powerful tool for breaking down stereotypes, fostering empathy, When you listen to music from another culture, you're exposed to new perspectives.
Right, new ways of expressing emotions.
Exactly.
And it's even more effective when it's presented in a way that's personal, like Liat does. It's not just, a random playlist. It's about understanding the stories.
Yeah,
the artist's intentions.
And when you have someone like Liat guiding you, it makes it even more impactful.
Now, speaking of impactful artists, Liat's next deep dive focuses on the legendary Ofra Haza, a global icon whose journey actually began in the Yemenite neighborhoods of Tel Aviv.
It's an incredible story. She broke down so many barriers, and Liat captures her essence beautifully.
I can't wait to dive into that with you in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Israeli music.
Yeah, we're about to go on this fascinating journey through the life and music of Ofra Haza.
Liat, she really starts by emphasizing Ofra's Yemenite roots, describes her upbringing in this neighborhood called Hatikva in Tel Aviv.
I'm curious how that specific place, Hatikva, kind of influenced her music.
So Liat describes Hatikva as having this vibrant cultural mix, right? Which definitely shaped Ofra's musical style. Imagine a young Ofra exposed to all these rich traditions, passed down through generations.
Reminds me of when Liat talked about those lively music venues in Haifa, those community spaces where people just come together and share their love for music.
Exactly. And speaking of sharing, Liat mentions how Ofra's mother was actually a popular singer herself at henna events back in Yemen.
It's amazing how those early experiences can be so influential.
Sometimes it's pure luck, too. Liat talks about how Ofra was actually discovered at a wedding when she was only 13.
Wow, imagine that, going from, obscurity to the spotlight.
Quite the turning point. Who knows what would happen if she hadn't gone to that wedding, right?
Yeah, you never know.
So after that chance encounter, she's invited to join this theater workshop, which really launches her career. She even stars in films like Slogger and The Suburban Girl, showcasing her incredible talent.
It's interesting how Liat connects that early success to this wider trend of Mizrahi music getting recognition in Israel. She talks about how Mizrahi music, with its Arabic and Middle Eastern influences, was often pushed aside by the cultural establishment.
Yeah, it's a complicated part of Israel's history, that tension between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi cultures.
And Ofra's story shows how music can really challenge those old hierarchies.
Give a voice to those who are often ignored.
Exactly. Liat does a great job of putting Ofra's music into that social context. It wasn't just about creating beautiful music. It was about breaking down those barriers.
Creating a more inclusive landscape.
One of her early hits, Shir Hafriya, became a real symbol of women's liberation. Liat explains how the term friha was actually used in a derogatory way, but Ofra kind of reclaimed it.
Turned it into this anthem of empowerment.
Yeah, it's a powerful example of how music can challenge those social norms. Ofra wasn't afraid to embrace her heritage,
And use her platform to elevate those marginalized voices.
and it really connected with people. Liat talks about how Shir HaFriya is still a staple in Israeli music culture today.
A real testament to its enduring message.
Speaking of enduring, Liat digs into this really interesting concept of shame that Ofra seemed to carry throughout her life.
It's a heartbreaking part of her story, how she felt that pressure to conform, especially when it came to marriage.
Yeah, Liat argues that Ofra was deeply affected by the shame tied to being a successful unmarried woman in a more conservative society.
It's such a thought-provoking observation. Those expectations that can be so stifling makes you wonder how much they influenced Ofra's choices.
Liat even points out that co-parenting and IVF were already options in Israel back then. But it doesn't seem like Ofra and her family even considered them.
It speaks to the power of tradition, right, and how hard it can be to break free from those ingrained beliefs.
Even when other paths are available.
Sadly, that shame even extended to her AIDS diagnosis. Liat reveals how Ofra kept her illness a secret, delaying treatment.
Out of fear and embarrassment.
Yeah, which ultimately contributed to her untimely death.
It's a stark reminder of the stigma surrounding certain illnesses.
And the devastating consequences that can have.
It's heartbreaking to think about how much that shame affected her. It's a reminder that even those who achieve amazing success can still struggle.
With internal conflicts and societal pressures.
And Liat doesn't shy away from that complexity. She uses Ofra's story to raise questions about societal expectations, shame, and living authentically.
And throughout all of that, she never loses sight of the music itself, weaving in the analysis, personal anecdotes, historical context.
It creates this rich tapestry that really captures Ofra's essence.
Exactly.
So one thing that really stood out to me was how Liat described Ofra's voice, like this blend of strength and vulnerability.
Powerful, but also delicate.
Right, like she could express so many emotions from joy to sorrow.
And Liat brings those emotions to life, through her own reflections on Ofra's music.
Like she's inviting us to experience it on a deeper level.
Feel the power of her voice.
And the stories behind the songs.
That's what makes Liat's approach so unique. She creates this space where listeners can really connect with the music, let it move them.
Inspire them, challenge them.
Exactly.
Liat also makes this interesting connection between the marginalization of Mizrahi music in Israel and how African-American music genres, jazz, blues, rock and roll, were treated in America in the early 20th century.
That's a brilliant comparison. It highlights how those cultural hierarchies can pop up across different societies.
And time periods.
Exactly, often silencing those marginalized communities.
And it shows how important artists like Ofra Haza are, those who dared to break those barriers.
And pave the way for greater inclusion.
I love how Liat emphasizes that even though Mizrahi music was initially rejected by the mainstream, it thrived in the hearts of the people. At weddings, bar mitzvahs, community gatherings.
Like true art can't be silenced, right?
Exactly. It finds a way to express itself.
And Liat does a great job of tracing how that acceptance of Mizrahi music evolved in Israel. She highlights the contributions of pioneers like Shoshana Damari, Zohar Argov, Boaz Sharabi.
Those who paved the way for artists like Ofra Haza to achieve mainstream success.
It's a fascinating journey of cultural transformation.
And she reminds us that that journey isn't over.
There's still work to do.
In terms of recognizing and celebrating the diversity of music, in Israel and around the world.
Definitely.
Liat's deep dive into Ofra Haza's life and music is a real invitation to engage with these complex issues, challenge our assumptions, and appreciate the power of music to bridge those cultural divides.
What I appreciate about Liat is that she doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable truths. She uses Ofra's story to shed light on those broader societal issues, inviting her readers to really grapple with them.
It goes beyond just celebrating a musical icon. It's an exploration of identity, resilience, and the lasting power of music.
To both reflect and transform our world.
One of the most moving moments is her description of the song Yad B'Yad.
Which means hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Liat talks about how those lyrics were inspired by Ofra's struggles early on and that yearning for peace during the Lebanon War.
It really encapsulates that message of hope and unity.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear how Liat connects it to her own experiences.
She describes the song as like a prayer, reflecting both Ofra's personal journey and that collective desire for peace.
It highlights that universal need for connection and harmony.
Something that goes beyond all the cultural and political boundaries.
Exactly. And it shows Ofra's ability to channel those emotions into her music.
Creating songs that resonated on such a deep level.
Liat also points out the role of chance and coincidence in Ofra's career. Like, the remix of Galabi was initially ignored in Israel, but caught the attention of a British record label.
It's amazing how those random events can change everything.
Makes you think about how different things might have been if that remix hadn't landed on the right desk at the right time.
It speaks to the importance of being open to those opportunities.
Recognizing potential in the most unexpected places.
Right.
It also makes you appreciate Ofra's resilience throughout her career, navigating those challenges with such grace.
Liat even mentions how Oprah survived a lightning strike while on a flight from London to Israel.
Wow, talk about a brush with fate. Makes you wonder if she felt like she had a purpose, you know?
Like she was meant to do something extraordinary.
Exactly. Liat uses these stories to illustrate the twists and turns that can happen in a life like Ofra's.
It's a reminder that even the most carefully planned journeys can be completely changed.
By those unpredictable events?
Yeah.
It's worth noting that Liat doesn't just focus on Ofra's international success. She also highlights her dedication to integrating her Jewish and Yemenite heritage into her music.
That's important. It shows how she bridged those seemingly different worlds, creating music that was both globally appealing and rooted in her own identity.
She became this symbol of cultural fusion, showing that you can embrace your heritage and connect with people from all backgrounds.
And she gives some great examples, like Ofra performing Imnin Alu at the Tokyo International Music Festival and winning first place.
Imagine that. It's a traditional Yemenite song, captivating audiences on the other side of the world.
It speaks to that universal power of music, its ability to cross those cultural boundaries.
And it shows Ofra's talent for connecting with people from all walks of life.
Absolutely.
She even mentions how Ofra respectfully declined to sing for the Pope because of her religious beliefs.
Staying true to herself, even amidst international fame.
It's a reminder that true artistry often comes from authenticity. Ofra's commitment to her beliefs really speaks volumes. Another great example of her dedication to her heritage was her role in The Prince of Egypt, where she sang "Deliver Us" in 17 different languages.
Talk about range. And that film introduced her to a whole new generation.
It did. Liat makes this really insightful observation about that song, "Deliver Us." She suggests that Ofra, maybe on a personal level, needed that message of liberation more than anyone could imagine.
Which is a heartbreaking thought.
It is.
But it adds this whole other layer of meaning to her performance.
Like it becomes this personal plea for freedom, reflecting her own struggles.
And it adds so much emotion to an already powerful song.
It's like Liat's inviting us to see beyond the surface, understand the complexities of Ofra's life.
Yeah, the emotions that fueled her art.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, where Liat brings us up to speed on the current Israeli music scene, I want to get your thoughts on something. Liat seems to believe that music can be a force for good, for positive change. Do you share that belief?
I do think music can connect people, inspire empathy, challenge the way things are. Just think about how anthems have fueled social movements throughout history.
Music can give a voice to those who don't have one.
Exactly. Create a sense of unity.
Even spark revolution.
And in a world that often feels so divided, music can build those bridges,
It's that reminder that we're all human, sharing those same hopes and fears, regardless of our backgrounds or beliefs.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Israeli music through Liat's Substack.
We've explored those giants like Fortis Sakharof and, of course, the iconic Ofra Haza.
And now, as we wrap up, Liat brings us to the current Israeli music scene.
And she does a great job of connecting these new artists to those who came before, showing this evolution of sound.
What stood out to you in this final part? What resonated?
Liat's focus on the sheer diversity of the scene really struck me.
She covers it all, right? From indie rock to pop, even electronic and hip-hop.
Yes, this tapestry of sound reflecting how multicultural Israeli society is.
And she talks about artists like Noga Erez, Dudu Tassa, and Lola Marsh, who are getting global recognition.
I was really drawn to how she describes Noga Erez's music as unapologetically political.
Like she's using her platform to address real issues.
Yeah, exactly. Challenging the way things are.
It reminds me of how Liat talked about Fortis Sakharof, using their music to reflect the anxieties of their time.
It shows that music can be both entertaining and thought-provoking.
And speaking of change, Liat brings up how streaming has really changed things for musicians.
Democratize the industry, given Israeli artists a bigger platform.
Those geographical barriers aren't as strong anymore.
It's created this interconnected global music community.
She even mentions Israeli artists collaborating with musicians from other countries, blurring those lines even more.
It speaks to the collaborative nature of music, its ability to bring people together.
And that brings us back to Liat's core message. the power of music to connect us.
She really believes music is this universal language.
That transcends differences in ideologies.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
I think her passion is contagious. She's not just informing, she's inviting us to explore.
To open our ears and hearts to all these amazing sounds.
And I feel excited about the future of Israeli music.
Me too! It's a scene bursting with talent and innovation.
And with artists like the ones Liat highlights, I think we're going to see incredible things.
I agree. This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I'm definitely going to be listening to more Israeli music.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I encourage our listeners to do the same.
Liat's given us this roadmap, pointing us toward these amazing artists and genres.
And her Substack is constantly updated, so there's always something new to discover.
It's a never-ending journey.
Before we go, we have to talk about her call to action. She's urging readers to support her work on Substack and Patreon.
Yeah, and she makes it feel like we're all in this together,
Joining a community
of music lovers and explorers.
And she's also pushing for subscriptions to her YouTube channel since she's been nominated for the Rising Star Award.
That's amazing. It shows how much her work resonates with people.
So if you enjoyed this deep dive, check out Liat's work. You won't regret it.
You won't.
This is the end of our deep dive into Liat's world of Israeli music.
But it's just the beginning of your own musical journey. Keep exploring. There's so much out there.